Welcome back to another week of Axis of Truth on JNS. I'm Emily Schrader, and this week we're talking about the difference between hostages and terrorists. Is there one? Well, you wouldn't know based on the reports from the international press this week. Plus, we'll speak with the incredible Jonathan Schanzer from the Foundation for Defense of Democracies, and we'll discuss all the latest in the Israel-Gaza ceasefire, or lack thereof. All that and more now on Axis of Truth. Hostages or terrorists? The truth is that the media can't really tell the difference. This week, the global press yet again crossed a line. Major outlets like the BBC, the New York Times, and others reported on the Israel-Hamas ceasefire deal as simply an exchange of hostages. Take a look.
Like so many world leaders and so many people around the world, the Prime Minister will simply be delighted to see what is happening right now in terms of the hostage exchange. But going forwards, I think what we'll hear from the Prime Minister of Egypt today is a focus on what comes next.
Really? 1,700 Palestinian terrorists arrested in combat situations for security-related offenses and 250 convicted Palestinian murderers are now, according to the BBC and the New York Times, equivalent to the 251 men, women, and children, civilians, who were kidnapped from their homes on October 7th, dragged into Gaza to be tortured and used as bargaining chips for more than 700 days. To reiterate, on the Israeli side, we have innocent Israeli civilians abducted by Hamas from their homes, from a music festival, from children's bedrooms. And on the Palestinian side, we have convicted terrorists who murdered Israeli civilians, including children, in cold blood. Yet now both are being described by the international media as hostages. But here's what the BBC and the New York Times left out when they repeatedly called this a hostage exchange. It's the fact that Israel just released men like Imad Kawasme, a Hamas commander, serving 16 life sentences for orchestrating a double bus bombing in Beersheba that killed 16 people. Or Iyad Abu Arub, serving 4 life sentences for organizing a suicide bombing in Kadumim that killed 4. These are the Palestinians who were released as part of the ceasefire agreement, not activists, not political prisoners, not innocent children who were kidnapped from their parents' homes. Murderers. Meanwhile, Hamas has been celebrating the return of our hostages like Guy Gilboa Dalal, kidnapped at the Nova Music Festival, or Alon Ohel, a 24-year-old pianist held underground for 2 years, or Avi Natan Or, who was handcuffed for more than a year straight in a tunnel. The moral contrast couldn't be clearer, unless apparently you work at a Western media newsroom. Sadly, it doesn't stop with the press. On social media, activists have been pushing this lie even further. Greta Thunberg actually posted a photo of a starved Israeli hostage, Evyatar David, and labeled it as a starving Palestinian prisoner. And now, unbelievably, we're seeing a trend online where pro-Palestinian influencers and even those in Gaza are calling themselves Holocaust survivors, hijacking the language of genocide to whitewash the terrorism of Hamas. There's no equivalence between rescuing civilians from terrorists and freeing terrorists from prison. There's no parity between hostages and murderers. And there's no journalism and headlines that erase that difference. Because when media call mass killers hostages, they don't just confuse the story, they're endorsing the crime. They're telling the next generation of terrorists that kidnapping civilians works. And if we lose the ability to name evil, we lose the ability to fight it. And right now, much of the world's media is proving that they've already surrendered. Well, all that brings us to the next topic, which is indeed Israel's deal with Hamas and who is actually being released. I think even more important question, however, is how long are we going to repeat these same mistakes? I mean, this deal, we saw the release of nearly 2,000 Palestinian prisoners in exchange for our hostages. And among the worst, some of which I mentioned, Imad Kawasme, whom I mentioned above, along with folks like Nader Sadaka, sentenced to 6 life sentences for orchestrating multiple attacks on Israeli civilian targets across Judea and Samaria, or Ahmed Adel Jaber Sada, who was responsible for blowing up a civilian bus and killing 11. Really nice people here. Nearly 2,000 terrorists total, 250 convicted of life sentences. And now, sadly, this isn't the first time that we've seen this phenomenon. In 2011, Israel released 1,027 Palestinian prisoners to free soldier Gilad Shalit, among them hundreds serving life sentences. Within 5 years, Israeli intelligence reported that over 60% of those released had returned to terror activity. Now, some estimates put that figure above 80%. At least 6 Israelis were murdered in attacks perpetrated by re-released Shalit deal terrorists. And guess who one of those released prisoners was? Who was also treated in Israel's top hospitals for cancer during his sentence? Yahya Sinwar, the mastermind and architect of the October 7th massacre. If that's not a case for the death penalty, I really don't know what is. And I just want to add that Sinwar was actually serving time for murdering Palestinians, not even Israelis, Palestinians. Here, as an Israeli, it's really a cruel paradox because, of course, Israel values every life enough to pay any price. And by paying that price, it ensures that there will be another bill. The moral instinct to redeem captives becomes the very currency that these terrorists exploit. And now, unlike the United States, Israel very rarely imposes the death penalty, even for mass murder. That restraint is noble until those murderers are freed in political trades, something that doesn't really happen in the U.S. Each swap essentially becomes another recruitment drive. The only sustainable answer may be what democratic states usually avoid, recognizing that the death penalty for the most heinous terrorist crimes is not vengeance, it's prevention. Until that debate is faced head-on, every deal risks becoming the seed of the next massacre. And that brings us now to the ceasefire or lack thereof. It's been a week of mostly calm between Israel and Hamas, but even as Israel has abided by the terms, Hamas is showing different intentions, to start against their own people. Over the past week, Hamas forces have executed and detained scores of Palestinians in Gaza accused of collaboration with Israel or spreading disinformation. Videos verified by Ynet, New York Post, and other sources have showed masked gunmen dragging civilians into the streets of Shujaya and Rimal before shooting them at point-blank range. Now, witnesses told local outlets that some of those killed were members of rival clans long resented by Hamas for challenging its rule. According to residents and medical officials, dozens of Palestinians have been executed or disappeared in recent days, including journalists. One of the most shocking incidents occurred near Khan Yunis, where Hamas terrorists stormed a mosque, pulled out 3 men who had criticized the group online, and shot them in front of the worshippers. Their bodies were later hung publicly as traitors. Now, simultaneously, Hamas officials have announced repeatedly that they will not, under any circumstances, lay down their arms, rejecting the disarmament clause in the U.S. brokered truce. Now, for ordinary Gazans, this ceasefire has oddly become a regime of fear. Checkpoints, curfews, and summary executions, and not from Israel, from Hamas. Even Palestinian rights groups have condemned these killings as lawless reprisals carried out under the cover of ceasefire. Now, meanwhile, mediators in Egypt and Qatar have privately warned Hamas that these actions could actually collapse the deal entirely. And the U.S. also warned Hamas that their attacks on Palestinians are in fact a violation of the agreement's terms. Not that Hamas cares anyway, of course. Now, remember, this week they also attacked and killed 2 IDF soldiers engaging in violence in multiple locations of Gaza and prompting airstrikes in Gaza against Hamas strongholds in response. For Israel, it only proves what we've said since October 7th, that Hamas doesn't just endanger Israelis, it brutalizes Palestinians. A ceasefire that coexists with public executions isn't peace and isn't a ceasefire. It's a theater of terror performed for the world's cameras, while ordinary Gazans are bleeding in silence. Funny how all those ceasefire now protesters are completely silent on the execution of Palestinians by Hamas, isn't it? Well, back over to the UK for our next story, where yet another scandal has erupted this week. Believe it or not, it wasn't the Jewish man who was arrested for wearing a Star of David at a protest that might offend anti-Israel activists. And yes, that really did happen. No, but this is about football this time. Now, Maccabi Tel Aviv is set to play a friendly match against Aston Villa in the UK this coming month and in the city of Birmingham, no less. Now, after this match was announced, the anti-Israel group founded by a former Hezbollah terrorist apparently assembled an entire dossier and gave it to the police, attempting to smear Maccabi Tel Aviv fans as racists. Now, instead of telling them to shove it where the sun don't shine, the West Midlands police moved to ban Maccabi Tel Aviv fans from attending the Europa League match against Aston Villa at all, claiming that it was for their safety. What is it really? Discrimination. Now, understandably, the backlash was immediate. The UK government itself intervened, with Prime Minister Starmer calling the move the wrong decision. The Home Office is also now seeking to reverse this ban made by the police, but some are so hateful they're even praising it. Local MP Ayub Khan openly defended the move, defaming all Maccabi Tel Aviv fans as racist. This isn't about safety, it's about appeasement. What we have going on here are the political elite merely trying, once again, to appease a violent Islamist mob, especially given the fact that Birmingham itself is 30% Muslim, 70% in certain neighborhoods. Safety is the job of the police. It's not a pretext for profiling Jews out of public life. If this stands, football becomes a test case for whether Jews in Britain have conditional rights. The Home Office and Aston Villa are now scrambling to undo the damage, but the message was heard loud and clear. When it comes to anti-Semitism, Britain's establishment and its police are still playing defense, not offense. Well, our incredible guest this week is none other than Jonathan Schanzer, Senior Vice President for Research at the Foundation for Defense of Democracies, where he focuses on Middle East policy and U.S. national security. A former terrorism finance analyst at the U.S. Treasury, he's one of the leading voices on Iran, Hamas, and the evolving conflicts shaping the region. Today, he joins us to shed some light on the recent events across the region. Jonathan, thank you so much for joining us today. Let's start with the most recent, these ceasefire violations that we see from Hamas. We see Israel responded already, hitting 83 targets yesterday, but it seems that's all they're going to do, at least for now. Will this ceasefire hold? And furthermore, if not, what do you expect to see?
Look, I expect Hamas to do whatever it can to survive. It's being asked to dismantle itself. So this is an organization that's been around since 1988. It's got decades of terror activity to its record. It's not interested in dismantling. It's not interested in handing over its weapons. And I think it's having a difficult time parting with the remains of those slain hostages that are still in its hands. I expect Hamas to fight tooth and nail as this effort continues to try to bring it to heel. I think that the deal may work in part. What I mean by that is that Israel will likely remain in more than 50% of the Gaza Strip beyond the so-called yellow line. That area will likely remain under Israeli control for many years to come. What happens inside the yellow line, those most populous areas of Gaza, that is the big question. And I think a lot of that really depends right now on whether there are people within Gaza that are willing to tangle with Hamas, whether they're willing to challenge Hamas, whether they're willing to work with the IDF, with the Israelis. And these are questions I don't know how to answer at this time.
Jonathan, you've consistently warned about the global threat posed by the Islamic Republic's malign influence from, nuclear ambitions to regional proxies. In your view, how much of a threat is the regime right now? I mean, should Western democracies be confronting Tehran more to effectively curb its destabilizing activities, or is that even an option now?
Look, I'm worried about those missiles. Primarily, the ballistic missile program that Iran is looking to reconstitute. They learned a lot during that 12-day war. They learned how to target things inside Israel that Israel is trying to protect. I mean, they were able to hit certain targets close to the Mossad, inside the Kiryat. That is not something that you want to see Iran get good at over time. And so as I see the Iranian regime building up that missile program, I get the sense that the Israelis may need to have another tussle in order to remove that threat. I think it could be helpful now if the West, led by the United States, maybe the Europeans, were to crack down further on Hamas, Financially, I think that would be helpful, looking to bring about the downfall of the regime through political support to the opposition. That would be helpful. But at the end of the day, one does get a sense that we're probably in for another round of conflict, maybe as soon as 2026.
Now, you've broken down the layered economic pressure applied to the Islamic Republic from U.S. in particular, unilateral sanctions to multilateral snapback provisions under the former Iran deal. Could you explain how each level works, what tools they give policymakers, and why sustaining sanctions remains really a necessary component of deterrence?
Yeah, I mean, look, the World Bank just came out with a report just within the last several days. And it's actually noting the contraction of the Iranian economy by 1.5% to 2% this year, another 2 to 3% next year. This is a sign that sanctions are taking a bite out of the economy. It's forcing the regime to choose between the support to its terror proxies in Yemen or in Lebanon or elsewhere versus keeping the lights on at home. That's exactly what you want to do right now to a regime that is known to sponsor terror and mayhem around the region. So I think that's the first layer of this. Then comes the support to the people on the ground. They don't need a lot. They need better intelligence. They need communications. They need funding, but not in enormous amounts. They could probably use some weapons, although I'm going to guess that a lot of Western countries would not support doing that, at least not yet. But these are things that I think can help bring about change or at least pressure on the regime. Again, keeping that fire lit at home, forcing the regime to start to think about, well, is it worth continuing to support terror, or should we start to think about providing better services to our people and keeping things calm, trying to lower that flame of dissent within their country? So these are the sorts of things that I think additional support to the opposition while we continue to ratchet up those sanctions. These are the sorts of things that I think we want to continue to see. But apart from that, getting good intel on the regime, figuring out where they're trying to reconstitute the nuclear program, where they're trying to build their missile program again, where they're trying to add some of those air defenses that were depleted by Israel. All of that is going to be crucial right now.
Now, ultimately, what is the end goal when dealing with Iran and its proxies? Is regime change or even containment feasible when you don't have Europe united on this issue and Trump, from what we've seen at least thus far, isn't willing to let Israel finish the job militarily?
Yeah, I mean, what we have is a mixed bag all around, unfortunately. I mean, we're not giving a green light to the Israelis, at least not at this time, to finish off the regime militarily. We have snapback sanctions, which I think is a good thing, right? This is what the UN, led by the Europeans, began to impose on the regime. And that's what's really taken a bite out of the Iranian economy at this moment. And it is hurting the regime. But what I see right now is a lack of a broader strategy, one that targets the regime's finances, one that supports the opposition. And really, I think the key here is, can we come up with a strategy that looks to ultimately bring down the regime and to put something in its place that would be, let's just say that it would portend more stability in the region. Right now, we don't have that kind of strategy. I think there are elements of what the U.S. has in mind that could work to that end. Similarly from the Arab world, similarly from the Europeans, but those elements need to be woven together. It needs to feel holistic. It needs to feel strategic. Right now, we're not seeing it. It doesn't mean that we won't get there. We've got another 3 years of Trump. We know he is not a fan of the Islamic Republic, but unfortunately, he's also not exactly a fan of Europe right now, not exactly willing to work with the Europeans hand in glove. We know that he supports Israel, but he also has this vision for peace in the region, and he's hoping that between the attacks that the United States launched back in June with the sanctions, that maybe he's going to get the Islamic Republic to say uncle. I'm not sure they will, but I do know they're feeling the heat right now. They are not in a good place. They are unstable. That is a good start. But I think to your point, what we don't have right now is that holistic, systemic strategy. Maybe we'll see one in the months or maybe even years to come.
All right, we do have to wrap up there, but I want to thank you for your insights and for shedding some light on what's going on in this region and, of course, what we can expect to see in Iran in the coming months as well. We'll continue to update about this story, but thank you for joining us.
My pleasure.
And now on to the good, the bad, and the ugly of this week. First things first, our good story of the week. Who doesn't love chocolate? Well, after more than 700 days as a Hamas hostage, Guy Gilboa Dalal was filmed eating chocolate for the first time since captivity. A simple, perfect image of survival. Let's take a look. On to our bad story of the day. We have this Oxford student, Samuel Williams, who was caught on video shouting, "Put the Zios in the ground." Apparently he thought this was very clever. Let's take a look.
Upright, a steadfast and a noble resistance in Palestine and in Gaza to look to be inspired by. And I don't want to yap for too long, but a chant that we've been workshopping in Oxford that maybe you guys want to join in. It goes, Gaza, Gaza, make us proud, put the Zios in the ground. Gaza, Gaza, make us proud, put the Zios in the ground.
Now, the interesting thing about this hateful little rant is that it's bad enough on its own, but after this, he was arrested and suspended from Oxford University for these blatant calls to violence against Jews. And when the police raided his house, they found weapons and bullets, which they confiscated. So this is a true wannabe Hamas terrorist here. Hopefully, now he's been apprehended for good. And good on Oxford University for finally getting rid of someone who's espousing terrorism. And now we have our ugly story of this week. A survivor of the October 7th massacre was targeted and threatened by pro-Hamas activists in the West on a college campus in California. Now, Yoni here came to share his story of survival from Kibbutz Mefelsim, where Hamas invaded, murdered, raped, and kidnapped members of his community. Now, these campus activists thought it would be a good idea to dress up as those same Hamas terrorists who traumatized the speaker for his crime of being Israeli. I think there are few things more sick and narcissistic than this type of activism. And I know we already did the good, the bad, and the ugly, but I have a special bonus just for this week. Palestinian activist Motaz Azaiza, everyone's favorite photojournalist who was escorted out of Gaza mid-war on a Qatari Air Force plane, is now being feted across the United States on a celebrity speaking tour. During his time in the U.S., however, he did make sure to take the time to post about his support for Hamas and armed resistance in a special post on social media. My question is, why was this terror supporter ever granted a visa in the first place? I mean, hello, where is ICE, Kash Patel, Marco Rubio? Someone do something? There is no way that an individual who's espousing these ideas should be going around the United States propagating such rhetoric, especially when Hamas is a U.S. designated terrorist organization. Well, that's it for this week on Axis of Truth. We'll be back soon with more interviews and stories from the Middle East. I'm Emily Schrader. Be sure to follow me on social media, Emily K. Schrader or Emily in Tel Aviv. And thanks for watching. See you next week on Axis of Truth, only on JNS.